Steve, everybody's heard of homeopathy. This is something that's been around a couple of hundred years. But I don't think that people really know what it is. And I think if they did find out what it is, they would be very surprised. So why don't we cover that?
Yeah, that's my experience. Even like speaking to my fellow physicians, they really have no idea what it is. And when I tell them what it is, their first reaction is, no, it can't be that. That's too stupid. It can't possibly be that stupid.
Yep.
I say, okay, well, look it up, just confirm everything I'm saying. And then when they do finally like confirm this is what it is, they're like scandalized.
Yeah.
How could this be going on? How is this happening?
Yep.
So homeopathy is a type of treatment of making remedies that goes back to Hahnemann, who is a Viennese physician, back to in the late 1790s, around the turn of that century. And the idea is based on the notion of using really small doses of things in order to make people feel better, right?
It's called the law of infinitesimals.
Yeah, and we're talking infinitesimal. They dilute things to ridiculous degrees, but we'll get there. And there's some complexity in terms of different philosophies of homeopathy about what kind of remedies do what. There's like the miasma theory of disease, and you have to use remedies that align with the correct miasma that's causing the symptoms.
And miasma meaning what?
It's a very vague concept. It's a pre-scientific understanding, right? This is before germ theory. This is before we knew how diseases work.
So it's like like the humors.
Yeah, similar. So they're not even treating really what we would consider modern diseases. They're just treating your ailments, right? So one of the primary laws of homeopathy in terms of deciding what treatments to use is actually called the law of similars, the idea that like cures like. So this is the idea that if you take a substance which causes a symptom in a homeopathic dose, that it will treat the symptom. There's no real theory as to why that would happen. It's basically sympathetic magic, It's like, we use the rhino horn as an aphrodisiac because it looks like a horn. It looks like an erect penis. That's about the extent of the logic. And then they did what's called homeopathic provings. I'm skipping over a lot of details here, but this is kind of what got distilled down to modern day homeopathy, in which you give, 5 or 6 or 7 subjects a substance, and you just say, write down whatever symptoms you have. Then you look for some patterns, and then those are the things that the thing causes, right?
Okay.
This is purely anecdotal. It's very subjective. Often there's a lot of interpretation that's going on in terms of what exactly symptoms it treats. So
this is what happens to a patient when they go to a
homeopathic
doctor?
This is not what happens to a patient. This is what's happened in the past to determine what substances to use to treat people. So if a lot of the subjects said that they feel sad when they took extract of whatever, of mistletoe, then mistletoe can be used to treat sadness.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, so it's like the idea being, because I heard of a version of it where they would give you a capsule that has a little bit of caffeine in it to help you fall asleep.
Yes. That's the same thing, but as I said, there's different approaches and philosophies within homeopathy, but again, most of what's happening today is they're using the homeopathic pharmacopoeia, which is just a list of remedies and what they do, and this is based on these provings, right? But the provings, which may have happened 100 years ago, were not scientific. Again, they were kind of ridiculous. They were subjective. And what you end up with is a rather fanciful list of substances and really just random symptoms that they treat that are not based on physiology or anatomy or biochemistry or biology or the understanding of how diseases work, pathophysiology. It's based on these provings, which were utter nonsense. And sometimes the remedies, the active ingredients, we'll call them, are like really fanciful. One of my favorite is some homeopaths took pieces of the Berlin Wall as a homeopathic treatment for ennui.
Wow.
Right. That's how metaphorical it gets. Or you have oxylococcinum, right?
Mhm.
That's a very popular homeopathic remedy. But oxylococcinum doesn't even exist. It was a misidentified air bubble on slides, and they thought, oh, it's a vibrating bacterium. It's like, no, it's an air bubble.
Yeah.
And they were surprised. They found it everywhere. So it must be the cause of all disease because we find it in every tissue.
Wow.
But you even find it in healthy tissue. Well, it's predisposing to disease because you found it in healthy tissue too. Or it's an artifact, and that's why it's everywhere. And of course, its existence as anything other than an air bubble has never been confirmed because it is an air bubble. So it's basically fairy dust, right?
Right.
So we have these fanciful, metaphorical, bizarrely formulated ingredients that we're starting with. That there's no basis that they should do anything.
And now let's get to the crazy part.
now let's get to the crazy part. But it doesn't really even matter,
Right?
Because you take the fairy dust and then you dilute it out of existence. So a common homeopathic dilution is 30C. Now, if you look on homeopathic products, you might see like a number followed by an X or a number followed by a C. So like a 5X would be a 5 times dilution. You dilute it 1 to 10 5 times. A 10C would be a C stands for 1 to 100 dilution, right? So X is 1 to 10, C is 1 to 100. So a 10C would be a 1 to 100 dilution 10 times. 30C would be a 1 to 100 dilution 30 times. These are serial dilutions.
So let's explain that real quick. So when they make a homeopathic remedy, they would take, per 100 parts of water, they would take 1 part of whatever the active ingredient is.
Well, you start with whatever the initial dilution is. It's like, okay, we're going to put 1 milligram into 100 cc's of water. That's your initial potion. Right?
And then you stir it up, you mix it together.
Yeah, then you take 1 cc, you put that into 99 cc's of distilled water or pure water.
So now you
1 to 100 dilution.
Yeah, you've taken
and then you keep doing that.
Right, so you take a little bit of the first container, you put it into the next container that's just water, stir that up. Then you take a tiny little bit of that and put it into the next container and then stir that up. And by the time you get to the 30th step, statistically,
there's no active ingredient.
There is zero original molecule of whether
it's basically just water. It's whatever's in the water. It's the background, concentration of whatever the water is. If you wanted to have 1 molecule of original ingredient remaining in the solution, you would need a volume of water roughly the equivalent of the volume of the solar system, right? That's the order of magnitude that we're talking about here.
Wow.
So basically there's no active ingredient left. It's been diluted out of existence.
And even if you did take 1 molecule of whatever they say the active ingredient is, it's 1 molecule, it's not going to do anything.
So there's basically no active ingredient in the remedy.
But there's always a but.
There's another layer of crazy.
Because there is another layer of crazy. Let me see if I'm going to guess where you're going next. They say, yeah, we know that it's not in there, but the water has now absorbed the vibrations of that molecule, and that's what the actual the quote-unquote medicine is. Yeah,
so and initially it was considered the essence. And that was as far as they got conceptually with it. Hahnemann's like, this will contain the essence of the original material. Because this is a pre-scientific idea that everything has an essence to it that is inherent to its existence. Not a scientific concept, doesn't really mean anything. It's just if you have a baseball, it contains the essence of a baseball, whatever that is, and that essence is separate from the thing itself. You could theoretically, like in a Freaky Friday kind of way, extract the essence from something and put it in something else.
So it's almost like saying that everything has a soul. A baseball, caffeine, whatever your ingredient is.
And so what's left behind in the water is not the active ingredient, it's the essence of the active ingredient. And the water has memory, so the water remembers that essence. In fact, it could actually make it more powerful. The essence can get more potent every time you do a homeopathic dilution.
Yeah, but what about the fact that all the water on the earth is recycled and has come in contact with lots of things, and human feces and everything that water has been through.
So the essence of everything is everywhere.
Right.
But what they'll say is, but you don't really get that essence unless you activate the remedy.
What does activate mean?
Yeah. So you have to shake it 10 times in every dimension. It's a magical potion.
You have to shake it.
Yeah.
Like a witch's brew. You have
like
to
a
stir
witch's
it,
brew.
shake it
10 times in every plane, and that activates it. Or whatever. They may do other things now, but it's basically that. You do some hocus pocus that activates the essence of whatever the crazy thing that you started out with to begin with, and now you have your homeopathic product.
And is there a methodology that has been written down that is the exact process to do this shaking of the potion?
Sure, but different homeopaths may follow different traditions. So it's not like there's one way to do it. And then, of course, there are companies that mass produce homeopathic products. They're not doing this, right? They're not doing any of this. In fact, I love, some of them you might see 30C and then another mark after it, like an asterisk type of mark. What does that mean? It means when they go from one dilution to the next, they're not measuring out 1/100th. They just empty the test tube and then refill it, empty it and refill it.
Oh, because there's a little residual
There's
in
whatever
there.
residual, that's good enough. Whatever residual may be clinging to the test tube, that's fine. That just makes the manufacturing process a lot easier.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So when we were at Google, right?
Yeah.
And we gave a talk there, going back, 12 years now, something like that?
10, 12 years.
I took an entire bottle
Yeah.
of homeopathic sleeping pills.
Right.
Right when we started.
Right.
I said, okay, this says take one of these pills to go to sleep. I took an entire one. We talked for about an hour.
Yeah.
Nothing happened.
Nothing
to me.
happened. Yeah. 'Cause
3 hours later, nothing happened. 6 hours later, nothing happened. It's
Yeah.
because I took essentially sugar pills.
Yeah, it was all sugar pills. Don't do this at home, though, because unless you know exactly what's in it, sometimes like a homeopathic product may say 2x, So there's a 1 to 10 times 2 dilution. There could actually be active ingredient in there. Probably not a lot, but if you took a whole bottle of them, can't promise you won't get any active ingredient. So you have to see what they started with and what the dilution is. If it's just 30C, there's nothing in there. Don't worry about it.
But and the warning is that there could be something in there that could be very bad. It could be nightshade or something that could actually have a negative effect on you.
They might put some actual drugs in there so that it does something. So it might be adulterated, it might be contaminated, or it might just list straight up. This is, they didn't dilute it very much, and so there's some active ingredient in there. But the standard therapies go from like 10x to 30C. They're pretty diluted, and 30C is extremely common. So, what's the prior plausibility that homeopathy might work? I mean, it's as close as you get to zero, right? There's no plausibility to the starting ingredient. They're diluted out of existence. There's no such thing as essence. The process that they go through is magic. There's no reason to think that it does anything. But what's interesting is that, homeopaths, which is true of pseudoscience in general, they never think all the way through and give you a coherent story about what's happening. So think about this. You take a homeopathic pill, right? What happened to that pill? It's a sugar pill. They made their homeopathic potion. They put an eyedropper drop on the pill, and now that's your homeopathic pill, right?
Yeah.
So now they're saying that the essence got transferred to the pill. And even when the water evaporates, which it will, so if the water memory now is irrelevant, so now, because they'll say, well, water memory molecules, it's all nonsense.
Yeah.
It's like they're looking at experiments which show like nanosecond scale structures in water, whatever. There's no long-term memory.
The water has evaporated from the sugar pill.
The water has evaporated. So again, you have to believe that it's somehow transferred its magical essence to the water pill, to the sugar pill. Then you eat the sugar pill. What happens to it? It gets digested. It gets turned into its constituent parts. And then it gets absorbed into your body and goes wherever. So how is the essence surviving that whole process?
And even if
knowing where to go, and what does it do?
Yeah, the essence then has to seek out the part of your body that is sick, whatever the sickness is.
Right. And then the idea is that your body knows how to respond. Oh, that's an essence of this bad thing. Now I really know how to fight that bad thing.
Wow.
Now, when you try to close the circle, what's actually happening? It's magic all the way down. It gets more and more ridiculous the more you push for. And then what happens? How does that work? It's just every step in that chain is pure magic. It has nothing to do with biology, biochemistry, physiology, pharmacology, nothing. Nothing. Yeah, it is pure pseudoscience. So, of course, when we study homeopathic, treatments, what do you think happens? There have been hundreds of studies looking at different remedies for different conditions. And predictably, if you look at the totality of the evidence, homeopathic products work for nothing. There have been systematic reviews, and there have been systematic reviews of systematic reviews. The UK did one, their Reality Check 2 homeopathy. Australia did one, and they said if you go indication by indication, product by product, there is no indication for which homeopathy has been shown to work for anything.
Right.
So, of course it doesn't. Now, of course, there's, as we often discuss, there's a lot of ways to p-hack your way to getting some fluky positive results. If you cherry pick one study, there's a lot of preliminary false positives. That exists in the homeopathy literature as well. But they're never able to show a consistent effect that you can replicate under rigorous scientific conditions.
Yeah, it evaporates.
It goes away.
Oh my
right.
God.
So it can't possibly work, and in fact, it doesn't work. So why does it still exist? Because most people don't know this.
Right.
They think it's natural remedies or herbal remedies or whatever. They don't understand how absolutely absurd it is from beginning to end. Only the real, true believers, know it and still believe it. They go, yeah, it's the magical essence. They believe in the magical essence. But for most people, they have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And even on, in the U.S., it's not transparent on the packaging what you're getting. The FTC a couple of years ago, put in some new rules to try to make the packaging more transparent. You have to say in plain language how diluted the active ingredient is. You can't just put 10C or 30C and expect people to understand what that means.
Right.
But most of them are non-compliant with it.
Yeah.
And the FTC doesn't have that much resources or teeth to do much about it. It's just a sternly worded letter, of warning.
Mm-hmm. So education here is key.
So education is key. I want people to know what homeopathy is. I want them to know what it is, because if you know what it is, you'll understand how absolutely absurd it is from beginning to end.
And when you compare homeopathy and everything that you just described, right, the whole process of how they came up with the essences and how much you're getting and what's actually happening with the pills or whatever, if it's a liquid that you're taking, compare that to legitimate discovery and manufacturing of legitimate drugs in the FDA process and the billions of dollars it costs to create a new medication and all the insane amount of testing that is done to make sure it's safe for human consumption and all this stuff. When you compare those two things side by side, it's literally looking like a firecracker next to the best rocket humans have ever made.
Yeah, and in the U.S., FDA automatically approves homeopathic products. This was forced through Congress. There was a senator from New York, Royal Copeland, who was a homeopath, and he snuck in this essentially automatic approval for homeopathy through the latest FDA bill. And the FDA, they can still determine the rules of how they're going to regulate it, but it basically made homeopathy a separate category from drugs. And the FDA decided that they weren't going to bother because it was so small. The market for homeopathy was so small. They said, we don't have the resources, so all right, fine. We're just not going to worry about it.
That's too bad.
Now it's increasing, and they're starting to take another look at it, and they're starting to maybe shift their rules a little bit, their evaluation, but not really anything significant. So still, there are homeopathic products on the market with no evidence of safety or efficacy. There's no reason to think that they work. It's a pure scam. It's snake oil. It's 100% pure scam snake oil, and it's the regulations are really horrible. They're just letting this scam be perpetrated on the American public. So again, what can we do? At least know what it is.
Yeah.
If you still choose to buy it, that's on you. But at least know what homeopathy is.
You can always send this video to your friend or family member or whatever. If they're taking homeopathic remedies, you could be like, well, why don't you watch this and start understanding what's going on.
Don't
here.
Trust us. This is all verifiable. This is all out there. This is the historical record, and even homeopaths don't necessarily refute these basic facts. They'll just try to bring in other spin or twist or try to make it sound like, I do this other method of figuring out what remedies to use, whatever. But it's all nonsense no matter how you look at it.